Welcome to the Football Monarchy podcast. I am Simon Doyle. Today is January 17th, 2021. We have just had the biggest game of the Premier League season so far, with Manchester United going to Anfield to play Liverpool. They went into the weekend first and second. I think Liverpool ended up third after Leicester's win yesterday over Southampton. So at the start of the game it was first against third, but obviously Liverpool with a game in hand over Leicester as they were playing a day later. So it was a top of the table clash. It finished 0-0. If any of you were watching my last video, the only video I have before this, I predicted it would be a very tight game. I thought that if Manchester United came away with a draw, it would be a good result. And I think, on reflection, a draw is decent. United had the chances to win it in the second half. The two best chances of the game really fell to one to Bruno, one to Pogba. And there was another opening in which, if Rashford had just laid it through to Cavani, who knows what might have happened. But going into the game, I think most United fans would have been happy to get a point. You keep that 3-point distance to Liverpool and you carry on from there. We've one more game to play on Wednesday, I think it is, against Fulham, which will bring us to the halfway stage. That'll be 19 games played once we play Fulham this midweek. So if we can win that game and get up to, would it be 40 points? We're on 37 now. 37 or 36. Anyway. So 40 points, if we can beat Fulham at the halfway stage, means that if we replicated that form in the second half of the season, we'd hit 80 points. Now, 80 points, while I think low to mid 80s would probably be enough to win the league this season, 80 points would still be a bit below target for United. I think getting 40 points from these opening 19 games, it's good given the bad start that United made, but really we shouldn't be looking to replicate that form in the second half of the season. We should be aiming for higher, because of that, as I was discussing last time, we basically had to treat the opening 5 or 6 weeks of the season as a pre-season. As we literally only got the squad back into training a week before we played that Crystal Palace game, because of our involvement in the Europa League in August, and the players were obviously given sufficient time to rest, which was always a danger that it could affect United's season badly. You would have to say it affected the start of the season badly. But who knows, maybe just going through the normal pre-season setup in the early parts of the season will pay off for United later on. That remains to be seen. But getting back to the game, Liverpool did have 66% possession overall. They did dominate the game. I thought the first half they were much the better team, without really creating any great chances. I thought United's back four defended superbly well today. Shaw, Maguire, Lindelof and Wan-Bissaka were all... they didn't really put a foot wrong today, defending anyway. But Liverpool did dominate the game, particularly the first 25 to 30 minutes. I thought they started much the better team. They put us on the back foot, and really, I would say that they still relied mostly on crossing opportunities, which they tend to do. Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold in particular tend to create a lot of their chances from wide areas. They're extremely good crosses of the ball, and they looked to use that threat. But like I said, the back four United handled it very well. United did set up with a 4-2-3-1. I predicted last time that would be the case, and that we'd see Pogba on the left wing, Rashford on the right, and Martial up top. It was a surprise to see Pogba on the right wing, where I've never seen him play before. Rashford was up top, and Martial was on the left. While at first that was a surprise, I think you could see in the opening 5 minutes why United were, or although you would have to say, went with that decision. I think first and foremost, they probably predicted that Liverpool would have to play Henderson in beside Fabinho, just as they did against Southampton over a week ago. They have a lot of injuries at centre-back, we know this. Not only is Van Dijk out long-term, but Matic and Gomez have had injury issues as well. So his options, Jurgen Klopp's, were to go either with one of the younger lads, I think it's Nate Phillips, and the other lad's name is Williams, I can't remember his first name, but he chose to go with the experience of Jordan Henderson. Now, Henderson doesn't have a lot of experience playing at centre-back. I think he's only done it a handful of times. But he trusted him. He trusted that the more mature player in beside Fabinho would be enough to counter United's threat. It was probably a bit of a gamble from Klopp. In the end, you'd have to say it paid off as they kept a clean sheet. Henderson, I thought, played pretty well at centre-back, even though I do think United didn't test him. They didn't really test him at all. Fabinho, I thought, was Liverpool's best player. I thought he, if you look back at when United had some openings, particularly on the counter-attack, I thought Fabinho was key to foiling them more often than not, and in and around the box as well. He didn't commit to tackles in the box. He was very patient and saw trouble out very, like a very experienced player can. I thought he marshalled their backline pretty well. Having said that, I do think United's quality was lacking in trying to play those balls through to Rashford. So I think Rashford started as the number 9 because of the pairing of Fabinho and Henderson, particularly Henderson. And I think the idea was for him to target them and try and get in behind at the earliest opportunity. But two things foiled that, and it was United's own doing. First of all, the quality of pass, whether it was from Pogba or Bruno or whoever else, wasn't good enough, particularly in the first half. It was poor. There was plenty of opportunities for us to put a decent ball in behind and threaten their high back line, and I don't feel like we did that well at all. We didn't execute that well at all. On the other hand, Marcus himself spoiled a lot of what might have been good passes by often being offside. And it drives me crazy watching Marcus Rashford make so many offside runs because he has such pace, particularly against someone like Jordan Henderson. You can give himself 2 to 3 yards and Henderson's not catching him. He starts his runs too close to the shoulder of the last defender. He can back off a little bit and give himself a bit more time. And I understand he's trying to time it perfectly because not only does he want to get past the defender, he wants to get himself into a lot of space in behind. But I felt the timing of his runs was poor. I think both Marcus and Bruno look tired. I'm not sure anybody besides maybe Maguire has played as many minutes as they have this season. We've been heavily reliant on them, and you know, all teams to a certain degree are heavily reliant on their best players, but given that we have Cavani and Martial and Greenwood and Pogba, I think we have to work a way of trying to give Bruno and Rashford a bit more time off, because I fear towards the end of the season when we really need them, they might be very ineffective. So let's hope that all they can come up with a way of obviously still winning games, but giving those players the rest they need. The other surprise, as I said, was Pogba on the right wing. Never seen him play there before, but for me, the most obvious reason as to why he was played in the right, and Ole didn't address this when he was asked, he probably didn't want to give away his reasoning, but if you watch Liverpool, you know how integral their fullbacks are to their attack. As I said earlier, they often rely on them to provide good crossing opportunities or to provide good crosses, I should say, when given the opportunity, for their front three to take advantage of. Now, a key feature of their build-up and their attempt to get their fullbacks into those positions is they will often look to build up through Trent on the right-hand side, and sometimes he can play deep crosses, which cause problems if the spaces are there, but also if you go and press Liverpool on their right-hand side, which most teams obviously do, trying to stop the supply from Trent, it leaves Andy Robertson very free on the left-hand side to get up and get some space, and if they can find him, which Trent often does, you'll often see Trent Alexander-Arnold play that crossfield ball to release Robertson down the left-hand side, who might be able to go at the opposition fullback or winger or whoever's there, or even create a quick overload on that left side with Mane and Firmino to try and get one of them in. That's a key feature of Liverpool's attack game to game. So I think Pogba was mostly played there because of his height. He didn't have to track Robertson all the way. He just had to be able to intercept a ball coming from Trent over to Robertson, and I think he mostly did that to good effect. And I think there was times that Trent just didn't even try the ball because he could see that Pogba was in a position to intercept. There was one time in particular, I think it was in the second half, where Pogba wasn't in a position enough, he didn't get back quick enough, and that ball was played, and Robertson did get down the left and caused a bit of trouble. It came to nothing because the back four dealt with it well, but I think that was the thinking from Ole. He played Pogba there to cut out that pass and then maybe take advantage of the space on transition in behind Robertson, in the space he vacates, and that was the side that Henderson was on as well. Henderson was playing left centre back, so I think the idea was for Pogba to win it there and play deep balls up the channel or wherever the space might be for Rashford to run into. It didn't quite come about that way. I think Liverpool's counter pressing was quite impressive. They didn't let us play out easily when we won the ball, which probably led to some of our play in transition being poor, but is no excuse for United's players. It wasn't good enough in that first half. In the second half it was a bit better, and we grew into the game a bit more, but the quality certainly wasn't there in the first half. Now, I do think 0-0 was fair at half-time because, like I said, for all the possession they had, Liverpool, they didn't really create. There wasn't much that they could look back on and say we should have scored there. But yeah, they set up with their typical 4-3-3. Like we said, the usual suspects in goal and at fullback, with Fabinho and Henderson playing in centre-back, like we said. I thought it was an ambitious midfield, like Thiago, Wijnaldum and Shaqiri as the midfield three, I think suggested an attacking intent from Liverpool, which we mostly saw in the first half. They did look to dominate and boss the game, and they mostly did in that first half. Now I know with Fabinho and Henderson at centre back, it limits the amount of defensive options they can play in midfield. I mean, Milner is the next best thing, I guess. Other than that, you're looking at Wijnaldum or Thiago to play deepest. From what I saw, I think Thiago probably was the deepest of the two, looking to dictate from deep, which he does. For me, I hate that Thiago's playing for Liverpool because I absolutely love him. I think he's a top player. I think he's been world class for the last decade. And I think a lot of people who perhaps don't watch the Bundesliga probably didn't know an awful lot about him, but he has been world class for the last decade. He's a top level midfielder. So he was pulling the strings at times, as well as being clever and committing fouls in transition a lot, which he got away with a bit. Not saying he should have been sent off. I saw some people saying that. I think there was a bit of a stretch, but he definitely made a lot of fouls in transition, similar to what Fernandinho still does at times, but obviously he doesn't mostly start for City these days. But but what Fernandinho used to do for Manchester City. And I'm amazed that referees, like, why have they not copped onto this? They cop on the diving, which we all want to see, good. But it's well known. Like, I'm sure they know that these players just commit foul after foul in transition. And by their own rules, if you commit 3 fouls, it should be a booking for persistent fouling. But players like Thiago and Fernandinho, yes, they do it cleverly, and it's very minimal at times, the contact and the interference that they make. But they can commit 4, 5, 6 fouls and just kind of walk away, shrugging their shoulders, with no complaints, and the referees just seem to let it go. Now, fair play to them, it's clever. It is clever, I'm not taking that away from them. I'm just amazed that referees haven't copped on to this yet, that this is what they do, and it often spoils what the opposition can do in transition. So I think it is frustrating to play against. Fernandinho is very frustrating to play against. Constantly make those fouls when you're in transition, and yeah, if the referee doesn't call it and do something about it, it's extremely frustrating. Going back to Liverpool's setup, they obviously had the usual suspects up front, the front three of Mane, Salah and Firmino, none of whom looked at their best today. They were restricted, obviously, with the space that United denied. But I do think that most of Liverpool's problems, for all the injuries they have at the back, I saw Paul Scholes say this after the game, and I had to agree. I think the front three are what's letting them down at the moment. It's creating opportunities and putting them away. They've only scored 1 goal in their last 4 Premier League games now, Liverpool, I believe. I think it was that one against West Brom. Then it was a 0-0 with Newcastle, in which they created a lot of chances. Forwards didn't put it away. Then they played Southampton and lost 1-0. Didn't create as many chances, but still were frustrated not to get a goal or two. And then today they didn't really create. There's nothing that they'd walk away from thinking we should have scored that. Unlike United at the other end. There was a lot of complaints about when the referee blew the half-time whistle, and I've had to look back at it, and you can see that he did blow up. It was 5 seconds left on the Sky Sports clock. Now, I'm shocked if most people don't know this, but the clock that the TV uses is their own timing. They don't know if it's matching the referee's second for second. It's simply the time that they start the clock at. Now, I'm not sure if the players kneeling at the start of the game is counted in the time, or is it, do they just do that and then blow the whistle again for the game to actually, and then they start their clock? I'm not entirely sure, because I do know they blow the whistle. I've noticed they blow the whistle again once the players get back up, just so everybody's, knows that, okay, we're starting now. I know, I'd like to know the answer to that. Are they actually starting the clock when the players kneel? Is that part of the process, or do they only start the clock when the players actually play the ball, when the ball's in play? I'm not sure. But anyway, taking it back, if you look back at the video replay, there's a pass. Shaqiri's the one that plays the ball over the top to Mane, and there's a pass, I think, from Wijnaldum, who has his back to goal in the middle of midfield, and he bounces it back to Shaqiri, who then plays the pass. As soon as that pass goes into Wijnaldum, I can't remember who played it to him, it might have been Thiago. When he plays that pass, you can see the referee puts the whistle to his mouth. So he's made the decision that he's blowing it up right there. It's going into midfield. So he goes, okay. For whatever reason, I don't know if there was seconds left on his clock or not. Maybe there was. None of us know. It's interesting that when a referee is adding time on, it's never in half minutes, or It's never 45 seconds or anything, because they're supposed to be saying this is what I have left on my clock before it reaches 45, because of course, like I was saying, the TV clock doesn't represent what's on his watch, so he might be stopping at times where the TV is not. It never stops on the TV. It just carries on. So when he's adding on time, it's only in multiples of 1 minute. Now, I know it's supposed to be a minimum added time. That's why they say minimum. Sometimes it'll go over that, and then you say, okay, but what if you have 30 or 40 seconds left as the referee when you reach 45 minutes have been played, but you've stopped your clock a couple of times for whatever reasons? You can't add it in 30. You can't add 30 or 40 seconds on, or 20 seconds, whatever it might be. So is it the case that at times, let's say there's a minute, but to them it's actually only 50 seconds, so it reaches that time and they go, okay. But again, just look at when he actually goes to blow the whistle. It's not when he sees Mane might be through and goal, which is also contentious, because Lindelof stops as the ball, he starts jogging and stops paying attention to the ball when the ball is mid-air. Like, people are acting like this is obviously a clear goal, which is, honestly, I've seen John Aldridge talking about this, saying, oh, I wonder why he stopped it, obviously hinting towards the fact that obviously the ref wanted United to win, which is just, it's pathetic. Like, John, go start a petition. Right, you seem to be good at that. Go start a petition. It's absolutely pathetic, honestly. You're putting the result down to that. Liverpool were not good enough in the final third today at all. Nowhere near their standards. And at the end of the day, that's what cost them the game, because they had all the possession they needed. They had 66% possession. They had all the attacking players on the pitch that they needed. So it was only by their own doing. Yes, United defended very well, but if you can't overcome that, can't go pointing the finger elsewhere. For me, Luke Shaw had to come away as man of the match. I thought he was absolutely superb. I normally have a few reservations about Luke Shaw when he plays, but today, particularly defensively, he was very solid on the ball too. But particularly defensively, I thought he was superb. I thought he didn't give Salah an inch, and also frustrated Trent as well sometimes when he pushed up on the right hand side. Couldn't fault him today, Luke Shaw. I thought he was excellent. United did have problems also building out from the back. I don't necessarily blame the centre backs for that, even though they're on the ball the most. I think for me, particularly Fred was very poor on the ball today. I think he had something like 50% pass completion or something. It was very poor from Fred today on the ball. He did his defensive job well, as he always does. He has energy and he'll win the ball back a fair bit for you. Same as McTominay. But I thought McTominay was smarter on the ball today. A few sharp turns out of the press, and it gave us the opportunity to open up a couple of times. Not enough. It's not enough from McTominay, but it certainly was more than what Fred offered. And to be honest, as much as I like Fred and McTominay, I want them both to stick around, and they're great squad players to have. I saw someone make the comment that I fully agree with. The two of them do the job of one really good holding midfielder. For example, if United took Fabinho today and had him at holding midfield, the difference he'd make to our team would be immeasurable. I think even a more mobile Matic. I think Matic doesn't get picked as much in these games because you need the players in there to cover more ground than Matic can, which is why McTominay and Fred play. But if you had a more mobile version of Nemanja Matic, with his defensive nous and also the fact that he just doesn't lose the ball, he's very, very solid at beating the opposition press in transition and getting the ball forward. yeah, I think that does cost United, and it stops us from really being able to go toe to toe with these teams like Liverpool, like City, etc. When we come up against them in these big games, I think I understand why he plays McTominay and Fred, but I think that is definitely an area that we could upgrade on, and it would make the world of difference to this team. If we get that position right and a right winger like Jadon Sancho in the summer, then I really think then next season we can start to say, okay, we should be right in the title race, as opposed to this season where we're a bit surprised and happy to be here kind of thing. But at the end of the day, the expectation at the start of the season wasn't that we were going to challenge Liverpool and City for the title. And come the last 5 or 6 games, we might be nowhere near them. It's still a possibility. I for one do think we will still be in the picture, even though I don't think we'll win it. I think City are favourites now. But I do think we'll still be in the conversation. I think we've shown enough that we can be consistent enough to make that challenge. Might be a tame challenge, but I think we'll be in the picture come the end. Edinson Cavani also came on in the 60th minute, and I did think he made a big difference to United's attack. Martial came off, and then Rashford went to the left wing. But I thought Cavani's movement just gave Fabinho and Henderson a bit more to think about. I think they were moved a little bit more out of position than they were when Rashford was there, and I think that's what opened up a bit more space in the second half, in that last half an hour for United, which is when United started to edge up the pitch a bit more and create a few more chances. That's when all our best chances came, really, I believe, after the 60th minute. Now, another thing Cavani did was play with his back to goal, which both Rashford can't really do, and Martial isn't the best at it. And I think there was a number of times where Cavani just took the ball under pressure and right in front of their centre backs, or even just laid the ball off again to an oncoming midfield player. That made a huge difference to United. I really do think when you see Cavani up front, you see what we're missing. We don't really have a proper number 9, because I'm not convinced Martial can be that player long term. As I said before, I thought he was our best player after lockdown. I thought he started to really look like a proper number 9, but he's regressed again since, and a 12-13 game stretch is not enough to show that. I mean, you've shown the potential, but it's not enough to show that you are that player to hang your hat on in terms of leading the line. And I think that Cavani will obviously be around for another year after this, but then he'll be 35, and obviously he'll be near the end of his career, or if not at the end come that time. So I think Solskjaer has a decision to make. I think if he could, he'd bring in someone like Erling Haaland tomorrow, because I think too he's not fully convinced by Martial, but we'll have to see. Anyway, it is still a bit of a problem area for United, as good as some of our collection of forwards is altogether. Both right wing and number 9 remain areas of possible improvement at the least. And coming down to it, Paul Pogba, I thought he was good in the second half. Thought he was the one really leading any chance of a winner for United and driving us forward. But you have to score those in those big games. You have to score those chances. Aaron Wan-Bissaka obviously got down the right very well and slipped the ball through about 2 or 3 Liverpool players. It was a bit fortunate to fall to Pogba, but it did, and he smacked it right at Alisson. I thought Alisson was superb for me, he's the best goalkeeper in the world, Alisson, and I think he showed why today. Not only in those couple of good saves he made, but the just being a sweeper keeper, and he came out a couple of times when we hit a ball over the top. I think Bruno was onto one and Rashford was onto another, but he made sure they had no chance. And quite envious of that, because David De Gea does not do that on the other end, and it's also part of the problem as to why we can't really play a high line a lot of the time. We can do it against smaller teams. We did a bit against Burnley in midweek, but I think United are hindered in wanting to play a high line because of David De Gea. He basically stays in his 6-yard box and doesn't really like to leave that area unless he's forced to, and even when he does, it never looks great. He never looks assured. I think even Dean Henderson does it a bit more than him. I wouldn't even call Dean Henderson a sweeper keeper, not of the highest order anyway, but he, even in the few games he's played for United this season, you can see that he will come out and sweep up if he needs to. He'll at least try to. David De Gea does not want to know, and that is a problem. But yeah, I thought Alisson was superb. And yeah, I really do think Liverpool's problems lie in their just going forward right now. Now, they've been so good for so long. They'd have to be wary of being too critical of these fantastic players. But for me, both Firmino definitely, he came a bit back to his best at the start of the season in certain games. I thought he looked very good. But overall, for the last year, or possibly a little longer, he hasn't been at his absolute best. Mo Salah, for me, in the last year also has, I'm not saying regress, but he's just been a little less sharp than he did in the 2 years before that. And I think Mane's definitely been the best player in that front three for the last 12 to 18 months, I'd have to say. I don't think his levels have dropped off at all. If anything, they've gone up. I think he's become world class, Mane, while the other two, I would still class them as world class players in their position, but they're not playing with the same sharpness, the same intensity, I think, that they were about a year ago. Now, Jurgen Klopp's football is very demanding. It is very intense, and maybe there's just a natural drop off that occurs after 2 or 3 years, and he would hope that it's replaced by a maturity and awareness that can make up for any lack in intensity and just an overall quality. And those two players are quality, but you'd have to say that their numbers in terms of goals and assists, Salah still obviously gets up there, gets a fair few goals and assists, but I don't think he's scoring at the average that he was a couple of years ago. Roberto Firmino is definitely not scoring and assisting at the average as he was a couple of years ago, and I do think that is a bit of a concern for Liverpool. I think they might need to rejig their front line a little bit. I said last time that I wouldn't be shocked if one of them was moved on, and either Jota or I think Minamino was supposed to be Firmino's understudy. I'm not sure he has the requisite quality to start for them week in, week out. So maybe if they did want to replace him, it'd have to be from outside. But I do think that Liverpool need to change something there. Need to get that right before they can move on and try and get back to the heights that they were at just over you'd have to say a year ago. Yeah. Anyway, my two concerns for United just coming away from that though is, first of all, we've now played Liverpool, Leicester, Everton, Chelsea, Spurs and City, who are the other 6 teams that you would say make up the top 7 at the moment. Arsenal this season don't count in that picture for the time being. They could come back into it, but I think they're 11th right now. So, but having played all those teams once, United, we've only won one of them. We won away at Everton, and that's not good enough. Obviously, last season we had the reverse effect where we were beating a lot of these teams, and then couldn't beat the lower team. So it is good that we've started to knock off the other teams easier than we were before. Still not, we don't win games 4 or 5-0 most of the time, or at all really, but we are making lighter work altogether of these smaller teams, and we're a bit more confident going into the games against those teams. Against the bigger teams, it's a 0-0 against Liverpool, Chelsea and City. In one way you can say it's very good to keep a clean sheet against all those teams, and it is. But we are sacrificing a lot of possession and a lot of just forward momentum in general in those games, and typically you can't win a league title doing that. Now, having said that, it is a weird season in which the title, like I was saying earlier, will probably be won with low to mid 80s in terms of points, and we still have to play all these teams again, most of them away from home, but that's okay because we've been better away from home than at home, so that might suit us a bit more. But we will have to, when we play those 6 games again on the reverse side, I do think we're going to have to win at least 4 of those 6 games, as well as beating Arsenal, getting a bit of revenge there. If we are going to be in the picture, I think that's going to be required. But having said that, it's not the worst record, but it's not great. I mean, we drew with Leicester too, as well, 2-2, a game that we should have won, and we threw it away a bit at the end. And obviously, we all know what happened with the Spurs game. So yeah, I do think we need to improve upon that record in the second half of the season if we are going to be in the title race come the end. I think United players as well, I saw them come out and say that they were unhappy with the result. A lot of them saying that, which is good to hear. Obviously, sometimes it can just be words from players that are trying to appease fans, but it does seem to be a sense of frustration that we haven't walked away with the win, which is absolutely a good sign. I liked what Ole did in the when being interviewed after. He came out and he did criticise the team and said that we didn't play well enough, particularly in that first half, and that he was disappointed we didn't come away with the win. And that is good, because when most people are saying, good point, it's a solid point, and you crack on, essentially when people are saying that the result was overall good, at least decent, that is a good time for the manager to come out and criticise the players a bit. He won't do it. If we had lost that game, he probably wouldn't have criticised them. He probably would have deflected and or just talked up how good he thought the performance was overall. Whether he did actually or not is besides the point. It's just good man management to protect your players against the press when they've been beaten, and to maybe have a bit of a dig when people might be praising them, just to keep that balance and make sure that the reaction is what's required. To play Fulham midweek, like I was saying earlier, and if we can go and win that game, then this point looks a whole lot better. If we can beat Liverpool at home later in the season, then this point looks a whole lot better. So it's all about what we do after this. It's 12 games unbeaten now for United, winning 9 and drawing 3, and those 3 draws were Leicester, City and Liverpool. I do think that we will have to put a similar run together in the next 12 games. Not that you necessarily have to be unbeaten, but I think we would have to, if we can win 9 of the next 12, even if you lost the other 3. I don't think that would be ideal, but even if you did, you would be right in the picture, particularly depending on who you beat. If we can beat City, and anyone else that might be around us. So yeah, not bad. You take a point, you move on. Overall, I think Solskjaer got the game plan right, because we made more chances than them. At the end of the day, your game plan is set up to create more chances than your opponents. That's what it's all about. You create as much as you can. You stop them from creating as much as you can. And at the end of the day, for all the possession that they had, for all the football they played, United made the best chances, and we're kicking ourselves a bit that we haven't taken one of them and walked away with a bit of a smash and grab, yes, but who cares? It's all about getting the win, particularly when you go away to rivals. I saw Jurgen Klopp complaining a little bit afterwards, saying that something along the lines of, it's hard to play against a team with those kind of players, particularly when they sit back and defend like they did and look to counter, which is a bit of a sly dig, I think, in the way he said it. But I always think it's pathetic when managers complain about how the other team plays. I really do. Arsene Wenger used to do this all the time when teams defended against him, as if you're supposed to just come out and play the way they do and then lose 2 or 3-0 and they pat you on the back and say, oh, you played well though. It's pathetic. Managers are there to get results, and they set up in a way that gets them results. And if Ole walks away from here with having one of those chances being put in the back of the net, then Klopp would have 0 excuses. It's a bit easier when you've drawn to poke at the opposition and say, oh well, they didn't make it a football match. But if you're not good enough to beat that low block and to overcome the defence in front of you, not even to make big chances, it's not as if they made great chances and are walking away kicking themselves for not finishing them. They didn't even do that. So that's down to your own team, Jurgen, and their lack of quality in the final third. So no point pointing the finger anywhere else. Again, I think there was probably a bit of deflection from Klopp, trying to turn the negative comments towards United's setup rather than Liverpool's, but that's all it is, deflection, because they've no one to gripe at but themselves for their lack of chance creation. Anyway, that's the end of that. Move on now to Sheffield United and Spurs, which is also on today. Finished 3-1 to Spurs in the end. Spurs uncharacteristically dominating possession. Maybe Mourinho listened to my last podcast. Spurs had 58% possession to Sheffield United's 42%. And to be frank, I think Spurs set up to play the way they normally play. I think they were happier for Sheffield United to have the ball, and then they pick apart the gaps, which they always do with Son and Bergwijn and Kane, and then Ndombele joining them as the number 10. Except today the setup was a bit different. Spurs had a back three with Dyer, Davies and Joe Rodon, who got who started today. He doesn't usually start, Joe Rodon. And Reguilon played a left wing back, Aurier right wing back, and it was actually Aurier who opened the scoring from a set piece before Harry Kane got the second with a shot from about 20, just over 20 yards, which Harry Kane does. Harry Kane, he's so good. Anyway, anything from 30 yards, anything inside 30 yards, that's even. It doesn't even have to be within the width of the post. He can just be outside. He is deadly from those areas. He can hit any corner he wants with such precision and pace on the ball. That's what makes him such a deadly number 9. He can shoot from it. If you let him in the box, he'll score. If you push him outside the box and force him to shoot from distance, he'll score. He's just deadly, Harry Kane, from those areas. He's a lethal shooter. And that's how Spurs got their second goal. But I think what really did in Sheffield United was how bad they were in possession. Because like I said, I think Spurs were happier for them to have it, as they normally are in a lot of games. I think when you approach a game against Mourinho and you say, we want to dominate the ball, he thinks, great, have it. And we'll make it very hard for you to advance and create chances, and we will pick apart the gaps that you leave open. And that's normally what Mourinho's sides are so good at doing, and Spurs did that today because Sheffield United couldn't really string the passes together. They got a bit better in the second half, but I think it was about half an hour to go when Dave McGoldrick got a goal back. They finally got the opening, and Spurs didn't do well enough this time they didn't stop the cross, and then McGoldrick got to the ball first and got a good header on it, put it in the bottom corner, put it in the far corner I should say. It was a great header from McGoldrick, and that brought them a goal back, so it was 2-1 with like I said, it was around the hour mark I believe. And from there, to be honest, I thought, maybe we're seeing what we saw in the last Spurs game against Fulham, where they've just took the foot off the gas a bit too early again, and it could come back to bite them in the backside. But they went up the other end and got their third not long after. It was an absolutely superb finish from Ndombele. I think it was Bergwijn chipped the ball in, and it was kind of going away from goal, and the defender caught up to Ndombele, but he just outstretched a leg, put it over the defender and over the goalkeeper's head into the far corner. The goalkeeper's positioning was not great. I think Ramsdale has not been a successful purchase for Sheffield United. He didn't have a great time at Bournemouth last year, and he's not having a great time this year at Sheffield United. I think Sheffield United do miss Dean Henderson. They miss that solid presence in goal, and I think it's costing them this season. Am I saying Ramsdale is the reason that they're so bad this year? No. And generally I don't think the performances have been terrible. They're not the worst team I've seen in the Premier League, Sheffield United, but their points tally would suggest they are. I think the goalkeeper situation is a problem. I think maybe because you would have to say they've lost their momentum since COVID happened back just over a year ago. When they came back from lockdown, they were poor. They lost their momentum, and they I think they picked up only 1 or 2 wins in that last stretch of whatever it was, 10-11 games. They weren't great, and they've carried that through into this season. So really that momentum has been gone for a year now. And it did start when Dean Henderson was still there at the club after lockdown in the summer. So the problems go far beyond their goalkeeper. I think I never like when people say a team's being found out, because I don't think football is that simple. That you can see what their tactics are, so you just alter yours to stop them, and that's that. Like they're good managers and good players, and while they're smart enough to know that, okay, if a team shuts us down doing this, then we can adjust by doing this, whatever it might be. So I don't think it's as simple as being found out, but it doesn't seem like that whole system that everyone was raving about last year, where they have the 3 at the back, but the 2 wider centre backs go and overlap and actually join in the attack and provide good crosses, while the defensive midfielders cover. You don't see them doing that near as much this year. So it could be a case that, once teams foil them from doing that, they don't have another plan B. But I seriously doubt it's that simple, because Wilder's not just going to sit there with his hands in his pockets thinking, oh, they found me out, I'm done. I'm sure they would come up and have other things up their sleeves to counteract that. It's there's something else missing from their team, and I'm not sure what it is. It seems like they have had some injury problems. I noticed Lundstrom and Fleck in midfield, who were integral to what they were doing last year, have had a few injury problems. They haven't been able to consistently play from what I've seen this year. They both played today, but I think they have been a miss, and I do wonder if there's just been too many. Maybe there's just been too many injuries over the last stretch for Sheffield United. When I say the last stretch, it's been almost a year now. So where their problems lie exactly, I cannot tell, but they look like they are going back down to the Championship. I would just hope that, obviously, if a bigger club comes in and wants Wilder, he might leave. But I think more clubs these days are sticking by the managers even when they get relegated. And I think that's smart, because it's so hard to establish yourself in the Premier League. You know, it doesn't, just because you can't do it with a team you brought up, doesn't mean all of a sudden Wilder or whoever else is a bad manager. It's extremely hard to stay in the Premier League, particularly when teams that are coming up don't really spend a whole lot of money these days. It's smarter to try and keep the core of your squad together and bring through good young players. And if you get relegated, you keep the bulk of your squad together and the coach, and you just go again, and you build that momentum over time to a point where you come up and you are ready to stay up. Fulham proved 2 years ago that just because you spend a lot of money doesn't mean you're going to be safe. Villa last year, I think, had the highest net spend of any team in the Premier League. I think they spent like 120 million. That's net in pounds, and they still only survived on the last day. They were lucky in many ways to survive. Now they've been fantastic this season, so you could say that maybe the money's paid off. But I think overall there's more success had by teams who keep the core of their squad and add 1, 2, 3 solid additions, and have had a coach for a while, for a number of years. I think there's more success to be had from building that way and trying to establish yourself in the Premier League that way, rather than just splashing the cash. So I do think they'll go down. Sheffield United, that's no surprise. I would be quite shocked if they do get out of it now, simply because I think the gap's too big. I think they're at least 10 points off, which obviously with half the season to go, you could easily catch up 10 points and they could well still survive. I just don't think there's 3 worse teams than them in the league that are going to drop that much more points than them. So I do think that's probably going to be Sheffield United done, but I would hope that Wilder, as I said, if he doesn't get a bigger offer, that he sticks around and goes again and maybe keeps the core of the squad together and rebuilds again in the Championship, because if they do that, I think they could bounce straight back up and have another proper go, and maybe second time around re-establish themselves. But yeah, Spurs have to be happy with the away win and holding on to their lead this time. As I said, when Sheffield United scored that goal, I thought this could be more of the same. But then Bailey, he saved Spurs a bit with that fantastic finish out of nothing, really. It was a superb goal. If it wasn't for that, am I convinced the Spurs would have gone on and got 3 or 4? Not really. Bit harsh to say when that's exactly what they have done. They've got the third and they very much looked like the only team scoring after that as well. That seemed to really put a dent in Sheffield United's momentum. But I do think that bit of class, that bit of quality from Bailey gave them the breathing space against Spurs in that last 25 minutes or whatever it was to see out the win. I'm not fully convinced they definitely would have otherwise, but they do, and I think went back into the top 4 with that win, although City won later on the day. I'm not sure if that knocked them back to 5th or not, but anyway, they aren't far off top, Spurs. So yeah, I think Mourinho, I'm not saying he has them right where he wants them, but I think overall he'll be he'll be somewhat satisfied with how the first half of the season has gone for them and what they might be able to do in the second half. So we'll see. Another game I watched this weekend was Leeds against Brighton yesterday. Finished 1-0 to Brighton in the end. And overall, I felt that was a fair result. I do think Leeds did have the most possession, 66% possession in the end. Their chances were very even. They had 7 shots each, both with 2 on target. So even though Leeds had the bulk of possession, they weren't making the better of the chances, or the more chances, I should say. I think the goal really came from a fault of one player in their defensive system. Stuart Dallas switched off and allowed his man to run. The Leeds defensive system is based off marking man to man, and I think it was McAllister, the Argentine, picked up the ball just outside the box, and Dallas fronted him up, and he played a pass into Trossard and then made the run for the 1-2 into the box, and Dallas didn't notice. As soon as that ball was played, he looked to see where it went, turned his back on his runner, and his runner just got a couple of yards on him and got into the bottom. By the time Dallas saw it was too late, he couldn't get back before McAllister received the ball back from Trossard, which was a nice little pass into his path in the box, and McAllister just played it across the 6-yard box to an on-running Mopé who came in at the back post. Ayling could also be to blame for also ball watching a bit and not tracking Mopé's run, but for me, when you're playing a man-to-man system and a player lays off a ball in and around the box, and you go to obviously watch the ball and you lose a yard or 2 on your runner, it's criminal. So unfortunately, Stuart Dallas, his 1 or 2 seconds of being switched off have cost Leeds there. Leeds had plenty of the ball, playing around their back, the centre backs, and then trying to advance up the wing as they normally do. They like to make wide overloads, lots of overlapping runs. They're interchanging and overloading in the wide areas to create a chance. They did a lot of that, but they didn't have a lot of penetration. Once they did, if you look at the pass map from the game yesterday, there's barely a successful pass from Leeds into the box. I think 1 or 2 at most. It's very poor in that respect. So that's what cost Leeds. I think Leeds, it's a typical excuse that's used when Leeds lose. So I'm hesitant to use it, but they did seem a bit tired, and I just wonder with the condensed fixture schedule, even though they'd be used to it playing in the Championship, I just wonder with the condensed schedule this year and there would be a higher intensity of game, obviously against much tougher opposition than they play in the Championship. I just wonder if that takes its toll every few games, because it looks like Leeds, they can have a bad game where they look a bit jaded, a bit tired, and then they bounce back and they play well and they hammer Newcastle like they did, and they hammer West Brom like they did. So I just wonder if that's just going to be the way the season goes for Leeds. Every 2 to 3 games they have a bit of a drop off, but then they play very well in the other 2 or 3 and get decent results. They get average results as they go along, win, draw, loss, draw, win, draw, win, that kind of thing, which isn't bad. Leeds are 12th right now, I think, and if they finish 12th, that's a good season. It's a very good season back in the Premier League after they've been out for so long, and hopefully if Bielsa can stick around another year and get the right players in that he wants in the summer, they could really kick on next year. Who knows what he could do if he got in a bit more quality, because I think a lot of the time when I watch Leeds and they don't win, often it is just that little bit of quality, which obviously they can't be expected to have, having just come up from the Championship. And they made some very good signings. Rodrigo and Rafinha have been very good additions to the side. They made 2 centre-back additions in Llorente and Robert Koch, but both of them seem to be quite injury-prone, which is costing Leeds, because Luke Ayling has had to play his, I think, 4th or 5th game in a row now at centre-back, when he's normally Leeds' number 1 right-back, of course. So they need at least one of them to get fit pretty quick and strike up a partnership with Cooper. Calvin Phillips was also missing yesterday. He was suspended, and I immediately, when I see a team sheet from Leeds and Calvin Phillips isn't in it, I worry for them, because I think he is so integral to the way they play. And Pascal Struijk, as much as I think he's a solid player and has good potential, he doesn't do near the job that Phillips does. In that Leeds, obviously they play a 4-1-4-1, and that one man in holding midfield is just integral to the entire system connecting, and Phillips does it so well, and they really don't have someone that covers for him. I also think Matthias Klick has been a bit poor in the last, I have to say, month, like 4 to 6 weeks. I think he's been quite poor for a little while. I think the intensity hasn't quite been there. The quality certainly seems to have dropped off. He seems to lose the ball far too much. And Rodrigo is obviously doing a good job beside him at times, but he's not a midfielder. Rodrigo, he is a forward. He's doing a good job in that position, but it's not his position. I think it's a bit of a makeshift move. I do think Leeds did try to buy a midfield player. They thought they had Michael Cuisance, I think his name is, from Bayern Munich, but he failed the medical. So, and it's no surprise he's been injured ever since he went to Bayern. I think he's been there for a couple of years now and has never got a run of games in the team, because he's had far too many injuries. So, but someone who I think could nominally play just in front of Phillips in midfield there, who can do that box to box job and is quality in possession, but who can also cover for Phillips when he's not there. I think that would be the ideal signing for Leeds to make in the second half of the season. I still think even if in January for the second half of the season, I still think even if they don't get that signing, that they will be fine. I think they'll survive, no problem. But I do think that's a real issue for them in the squad, and I think they might lose a few more games that they shouldn't, because of the lack of personnel at the moment in midfield, in my opinion. When they have Phillips, Rodrigo and Klick, normally if that three is there, normally it's good enough. But you're asking an awful lot from those three players to do that for the whole season. They have Pablo Hernandez there, but he's 34, 35 now, and he certainly can't play. I don't think he can play week to week, never mind twice a week. So, and Tyler Roberts doesn't seem to get a look in. I think he should probably be looking for a move before long, because he's not really getting a chance at Leeds. So they've got Jamie Shackleton as well, who's good. I like him. He's got a lot of energy, but he doesn't have that quality. Doesn't have that real quality in possession to demand a starting spot. So yeah, if I was Bielsa, and I'm sure he does want this player, because like I said, he tried to bring in Cuisance. They thought they had him before he failed the medical. So I think that would be the ideal signing for Leeds to make in January. I'm sure he'll be pushing for that. But yeah, like I said, Leeds move on, and you wouldn't be surprised to see them. I'm not sure who they play next, but you wouldn't be surprised to see them win 2 out of the next 3 games, and then maybe the one they don't win, they lose 4 or 5-0. Like, they're just that kind of team at the moment. They play a very open game, which we all love to watch. It's very entertaining. Sometimes they get caught out, but yeah, that's another thing that obviously there was that debate for a while, particularly after United beat them 6-2. over whether Bielsa should change his approach at all. And I just laugh when I hear these conversations, because these are like professional people in the media having these conversations, and none of them seem to have a clue about who Marcelo Bielsa is. And you would think if you're on TV discussing someone that you would do a bit of research. And Marcelo Bielsa is wedded to his ideals. He coaches a team and manages a team to see if his football will work, if his ideas will work. The minute you ask him to compromise that at all, he might as well not be there in his own thinking, and he will just walk away. And he's done that in situations before, where I'm not saying the club came to him and said, hey, could you change your football a bit? That might have happened before, I'm not entirely sure. But once they can no longer give him the platform that he needs to implement his ideals, his philosophy, he's done. He might as well not be there. That's his way of thinking. He's not coming here to try and do well for Leeds and get results for Leeds. He takes on a job to see if his football can work in that league. It's like a testing ground for him, because he is this football nerd. That's why they call him El Loco. He's crazy about the most minute of details in the sport on the pitch. And if you were to have a conversation with Bielsa, the minute you suggested, would you not just do this instead, just so you don't concede so many goals, the conversation would be done. He has no intention of playing somebody else's football. No intention whatsoever. Doesn't care if it gets more results. He doesn't care. He's there to implement his style of play and his philosophy, his ideals. And that's that. So, yes, his team will lose stupid games sometimes, but they'll also win fantastic games, and they'll surprise people and play some wonderful football. I saw them beat West Brom a couple of weeks ago. I think it was 5-0 in the end. They played some absolutely marvellous football. I don't think I've ever seen the likes of such football come from a newly promoted team. So, Bielsa will be Bielsa. As for Brighton, I said last week that I do think Brighton, after they played City, they are one of the best teams in the bottom half of the table at keeping possession, and their build-up play can be quite impressive at times. But yet they hover just above the relegation zone. Now, a lot of people tipped them to go down. I think in my predictions this season I had West Brom, Fulham and Brighton to go down. I was very reluctant to put Brighton in that bottom three, because I do like Graham Potter and I do like the football that Brighton at least attempt to play. I was just worried about their lack of ability to score goals, and I still think that is an issue. They've got some clever forwards in like Mopai and McAllister, Trossard. These are good players. Connolly as well, the Irish lad is I think he's out injured at the moment. I haven't seen him play for a little while, but I do think that their forward line does hinder them a little bit. I don't think there's enough goals in that forward line. Brighton under Chris Hughton used to rely a lot on scoring from set pieces, and you can see why, given the centre backs that they have. And they still can cause plenty of problems from set pieces, Brighton, but I fear their forward line doesn't give them enough. It's just not enough firepower up there to win enough games. Now, having said that, the way things stand, I still think they're better than at least 3 teams around them. Whether or not they'll have that nous to keep them up, like when I think of, for example, a direct comparison, are they better than Newcastle. For me, they do almost everything better than Newcastle, but Newcastle seem to have this grit. There's something about them that they just don't get beaten as much as their football suggests they should, or their lack of football. So that's what made me decide that Brighton would probably go down. I felt like going into the season that they don't quite have the grit and that ability to pull results out of nowhere that a couple of teams around them have. But at the moment, I hope I'm wrong, because I think I have been impressed by Brighton most times I've watched them. And I think Graham Potter and many of his players that he has there, and some of the football they play, is a credit to the league. So I'd like to see them stay up. There's a couple of other games yesterday. I did not get to see Wolves against West Brom. Actually, I did see the last half hour of it, but can't comment on the whole game. I think it finished 3-2 to West Brom, which is obviously a great win for them against Wolves, away to Wolves in the Black Country Derby, as they call it. I think all 5 goals were scored by set pieces. I think there was one penalty, one throw-in, a couple of corners and a free kick, if memory serves me right. I think West Brom took the lead with a penalty and Wolves clawed their way back, got the 2-1, and then West Brom obviously equalised and then got the winner late on. But they also conceded their 2 goals from set pieces, like I said, and I don't think Sam Allardyce will be happy about that. I think he mentioned that in his post-match press conference, because obviously he prides himself on his teams being strong at set pieces. Set pieces are a great leveler in football, because you don't need the technique and awareness that you do in open play from set pieces. Really, it is a great leveler, because more average footballers can compete with top level footballers when it comes to simply jumping for an aerial ball or scrambling for a decent cross. So Sam Allardyce not happy about conceding from set pieces, but they win the game. It's a big win. So who knows? West Brom, they looked a bit dead and buried under Bilic, but maybe Sam Allardyce can work his magic. It's a decent win. They've gotten some decent results under him, a couple of bad ones too. I mentioned Leeds beating them 5-0. But they have gotten a couple of decent results since Sam has come in. So who knows? I still personally think they just don't have enough quality to stay up. They brought in Robert Snodgrass as a good addition. I think they had Snodgrass, Pereira and Robinson started the game yesterday. Or did Robinson come on? I can't remember now. But Snodgrass does give them that bit of quality. He's a very good cross of the ball. Snodgrass delivers a good cross in, and has that bit of experience, obviously a Premier League experience, a lot of Premier League experience really. But for me, they still, similar to Brighton, I just don't think they have enough firepower up front. West Brom, I'm never too impressed by their forwards, but we'll see. They might have enough in them. I just still feel like they're one of the 3 worst teams. So I still think they just won't quite have enough to stay up, but I think they'll give it a good fight under Sam. Wolves, I saw someone make the joke earlier that Wolves, when they play the 2 Manchester clubs, they're unreal, and then you see them against the rest of the league and it's poor. Obviously it's an over exaggeration, but Wolves certainly haven't been as good this year as they have in the last 2 seasons. There is a couple of reasons for that that are obvious, which is that obviously they sold Jota in the summer. He was a big player for them. His partnership with Jimenez was immense the last couple of years, And not only have they sold one half of that partnership, but the other one has been injured for a couple of months now and probably won't play again this season. Jimenez, obviously, he cracked his skull. I think it was against Tottenham. I can't recall now, but it's doubtful. I think that he'll play again this season, and Jimenez is so integral to Wolves and the way they play. And while they have some other very good forwards, Neto's a good player. I'm very impressed by Daniel Podence. I think he's a superb talent. And they have the young Portuguese lad Fabio Silva as well. The drop off in quality between that partnership of Jimenez and Jota to what they have now it's too much. They've also had a couple other injury problems. I noticed Johnny, their usual starter at left wing back, has been injured. Now I do think Ait Nouri has been more than a capable deputy at left wing back. I think he has been quite good. But again, when you change so many pieces to a very well functioning side, particularly when you're a club like Wolves, they have a very good squad for the club that they are, but it's not the deepest. They can't have that much quality in reserve, and I think it's just showing that from these teams, as well as they do at times, if you take 2 or 3 key cogs out of the machine, they start to suffer for it. And it's you can't blame the manager for that. You can't really blame anyone at the club for that. They've done an incredible job of putting together the squad that they have, and I'm sure the manager and his coaching team, Nuno Espirito Santo, I think they're probably just feeling the effects of the lack of quality, the drop off in quality from what they've had in the last couple of years. Now, having said that, they could refine some of that form the second half of the season and still punch their way into finishing in the top, as high as the top 6 places, because everything is still very compact in there. But for me, I think this will probably be the story of their season. They'll still put in a few very good performances and probably beat a couple of the bigger teams once or twice between now and the end of the season, but I think they're probably destined just to finish mid-table. And to be quite honest, given the 2 seasons they've just had, having another season where you cement yourself in mid-table is not a bad thing. It'll mean they can go into next season refreshing the squad with a new approach, whatever that might look like, with no European football to I don't want to say distract them, because obviously a very good thing if Wolves can get some Europa League, but I think they could do without having the added level, the added amount of games, and just focus domestically on re-establishing that strength that they had in the last couple of seasons, if they can. It's not so easy to just go out and find players like Jota and Jimenez, although I am very impressed by Daniel Podence. I think he's the closest thing that we have, the league has, to Eden Hazard. I think he's quite similar in style. For me, I think he's a very talented player, Podence, and he could develop into a real difference maker for Wolves. We'll see. But yeah, I don't think Wolves fans, they'll be disappointed obviously, but I don't think there'll be too many pointing any fingers. I think they'll be happy enough with how their club has re-established themselves as a proper Premier League outfit now. And I think they'll just be hoping the manager sticks around, because he's done a great job so far. And if he went, they'd probably find it tough to replace him with someone capable enough. So, yeah. Alright. Another game I didn't see at all. West Ham against Burnley. Finished 1-0 to West Ham, which is a good result for them. They're quietly just going about their business this season, West Ham, and I think Dave Moyes has been given the license to go and do what we know Dave Moyes can do. I think that man has gotten he's gotten a lot of stick that he doesn't deserve, David Moyes, ever since the United job obviously went south for him. And I think he made some bad decisions after that. I'm not sure going to Real Sociedad was the best idea. But people are forgetting how good a job David Moyes did with Everton for a decade. I was happy when United mentioned or said that David Moyes would be Sir Alex's successor, because I thought we needed someone who had a proven track record in the Premier League of sustaining a level of a club over the stretch of time which he did, which was 10 years. And I thought, given better resources, obviously United have a lot more money than Everton. He kept Everton challenging for top 4 almost every year for a decade. Given the proper resources that United have, and I bet you he can sustain that. The levels of obviously that United are used to being first or second for that stretch of time too. Obviously that didn't pan out the way I thought. I was proven wrong. He just didn't really have the quality to handle the top level players, but that doesn't suddenly make him a bad manager. He did a superb job at Everton, and I think he got a lot of disrespect just because of the way the United job unfolded for him. I think now West Ham seem to have settled into giving him the platform to do exactly what he did at Everton, whereas they seem reluctant to do that before, because they wanted more expansive football, the West Ham way, I suppose. And they went for Pellegrini, and they thought, he's a man who plays open, expansive football. He'll bring that to West Ham. We'll sign some good players, and we'll establish ourselves as a top 10 Premier League club. I think that was their thinking, and they have had relative success in the transfer market overall. I'd say West Ham, that most of the players they brought in over the last couple of years have been very good signings, and one or two have been bad. I'll get on to one in a minute, but overall their transfer strategy has made sense. I think the signings that they've made under Moyes, Soucek, and the right back Kufal, have been very, very solid additions. Soucek is a bit of a diamond in the rough. He's been a superb signing, and Kufal has been a very solid addition at either right back or right wing back for West Ham. Jared Bowen has been another excellent signing. He's dropped off a bit lately in terms of his form and his effectiveness, but he's been an excellent signing. Pablo Fornals is in there. Mikel Antonio obviously came in a few years ago and has established himself now as a striker. When he came in, he was more of a winger who could play a fullback and wing back. Now he's their main man up front, but he's injury prone. And West Ham have turned to their 30 million signing they made just over a year ago, Sebastian Haller, to cover. Now, Sebastian Haller, you look at him and you think he is a typical old-fashioned number 9. He'll hold the ball up, he'll be good in the air, and he'll physically challenge the opposition centre-backs, similar to what Giroud does, although Giroud is very, very, very good on the floor. But that's not Haller's game. That is not what Haller did at Eintracht Frankfurt. Same to Joe Linton at Hoffenheim. These players, just because they have big frames, these Premier League teams buy them thinking they will do the job that a big number 9 typically does, but they're not that type of player. They haven't been playing in those kind of systems. They haven't really been utilised in that way before. They're more used to playing some counter-attacking football where they're on the front foot, facing goal in attacking phases, not holding the ball up with their back to goal. And Sebastian Haller for me has looked a very frustrated figure playing for West Ham for a while, and he has now gone to Ajax. I don't know if it was just on loan or if Ajax bought him outright. I'm uncertain. I think it was a loan. A bit of a surprising one, but what it does mean is that West Ham probably need to go out and buy someone else now, because, like I said, Antonio is their main man, but he's quite injury prone. He'll easily miss a third of the season most of the time, so they definitely need to. I was looking at their bench today, and they didn't really have a decent option to bring on up front if they needed to. So again, they won 1-0 today, so in the end they didn't need it, but there will come a time when they absolutely need someone who can play at number 9, and right now it looks like they only really have one. I'm not sure. I mean, Yarmolenko can maybe play as a striker. That was probably their next option, but I think they're definitely going to need someone who can play at number 9. West Ham need to replace Haller. Moving on then, just a couple of games left to mention. Chelsea beat Fulham 1-0, and probably should have been more for Chelsea, but only because Fulham were down to 10 men for the entire second half. It was the 44th minute in which Anthony Robinson rightfully got sent off. When I saw it at first in real time, I thought it was a bit harsh, but once I saw the replay, you had to admit that he went flying with his body up in the air at Azpilicueta, and to be honest, if he hadn't have taken his leg out of the way, it might have been a nasty one. But he willfully got out of the way, Azpilicueta, and he was sent tumbling in the air. But he wasn't faking it at all. It was a rough tackle. He could have broken his leg. So it was a fair sending off. It was stupid from Robinson. He's cost his team a half time. Because frankly, I would have very much liked to seen that second half 11v11. I think it would have been very interesting, because I don't think Chelsea were doing a great job in the first half of breaking Fulham down. I think they had the better of it and they had more of the ball, but that's to be expected. They weren't really creating enough, Chelsea. They looked to be trying to force it a bit in the final third. They started with what for me is their best front three at the moment, which is Giroud at number 9, Ziyech on the right wing, and Pulisic on the left, and then a midfield three of Jorginho, Kovacic, and Mason Mount. Azpilicueta started at right back, and you had Chilwell at left back, Rudiger and Thiago started at centre back for Chelsea. Rudiger has come in a bit from the cold in recent times, I think, to play a couple of games. And that's the first thing I want to mention. I think I saw today as well that Fikayo Tomori looks like he's gone to Milan. Possibly for a 30 million deal, not even just a loan. And I'm quite shocked by this. Chelsea fans, tell me if I'm completely wrong. From watching Chelsea last season, if you asked me at the start of this season what Chelsea's best centre-back pairing was, I would have said Rudiger and Tomori. I thought both of them were your most solid options at centre-back last season. Now, Zuma has proven to be probably the right choice this year. I think he's improved a lot, because for me a year ago he was an accident waiting to happen. He looked like a bit of a liability. He looks a lot more solid and assured this year, as well as popping up with a good few goals from set pieces. He's quite the threat from set pieces now. And he struck up a decent partnership with Thiago. I think Thiago does much of the organising, and Zuma can just play his game of typically attacking the first ball. He's very good in the air, Zuma. So in the long stretch, maybe Lampard has been vindicated for sticking with him. But for me, Rudiger and Tomori were both much calmer influences than Zuma last season anyway in that Chelsea backline, and I thought both were a bit better on the ball than Zuma as well in terms of playing out. Obviously Thiago's very good on the ball. Christensen is too, so maybe they're not missing out in terms of the centre back options they have in terms of their contribution to the build-up play, but I'm just surprised that from the start of the season it seemed to be a very firm decision from Lampard that Rudiger and Tomori weren't really in the plans anymore. I think he's willing to let both of them go, and they were, like I said, they were the two that I probably would have been selecting as the best two only 4 or 5 months ago. So again, tell me if I'm completely wrong, but just a bit shocked at that. I think it's a bit quick. I mentioned that I like the front three: Pulisic, Ziyech and Giroud. Giroud has always been a class act for me, so underrated. I'm quite shocked Arsenal let him go the way they did. I understood they wanted to move to a more fluid and pacey system and Aubameyang to take over as the main number 9, but I don't know, I think it was a bit of an oversight selling Giroud to Chelsea. Not a smart move in hindsight. Giroud's a very classy player and brings other players into play so well. He is the best. When we think of typical big number 9s that can hold the ball up and are an aerial threat, I think Giroud is the best at that in world football, at that kind of role, the hold up role. But yeah, as much as I like Pulisic and Ziyech, Ziyech has had a few injury problems since he came in, and when he has played he's looked good, so maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but I don't think either of them contribute consistently enough for Chelsea's attack to be as lethal as they want it to be. I still think they're the best two options, although I do think Hudson-Odoi is very unlucky not to be included more than he is. I'm wondering if he's regretting not making that move to Bayern Munich a couple of years ago when they wanted him, because for me, every time I see Hudson-Odoi play, he impresses. I think he's a very, very good player, and frankly, if United couldn't get Jadon Sancho, he's the next best player I'd want to play at the right wing. I very much doubt we'd get him from Chelsea, so I don't think he's attainable. That's why I haven't really mentioned him before, but I think he's a very talented player, Hudson-Odoi. He impresses me every time I see him play, and there's only so long that you can keep Hudson-Odoi, Ziyech, Pulisic, Werner, Giroud and Tammy Abraham all happy. Now I know Giroud is getting on a bit in age. Maybe this will be his last season at Chelsea anyway. But for me, there's going to have to be some decisions made over who they might be willing to let go from that group. And at the moment, it looks more like Abraham and Hudson-Odoi that'd be the most likely to leave, if anyone was. It's funny how much praise Chelsea got last season for using these academy players. Finally had a great academy for a long time, but they never actually used it. Finally last season they were forced into using it because they couldn't use the transfer market. They had a ban, and a lot of these players performed quite well. Like I thought Tomori had a good season. Mason Mount had a good season last year. He's still involved heavily, sometimes a bit too much, but he scored the goal yesterday, so Frank was vindicated. But I thought Abraham was very good last season, and like I said, I've always been impressed by Hudson-Odoi. Reece James obviously came in and has established himself as the number one right back at Chelsea now. But for all the praise that they've got for bringing through these young players and letting them establish themselves in the first team. He seems to have quickly put Tomori basically on the you can leave list, and Abraham and Hudson-Odoi they don't seem to be among his favoured. So it is curious. I do wonder what the long-term strategy is for Chelsea. When they were playing, they spent, we all know how much money they spent in the summer, and some of that was making up for the fact that they couldn't spend last summer. But I did think when they were bringing in these players, it's easy to say in hindsight, but I did think at the time that I wasn't sure how they were all going to fit in. I'm a big fan of Ziyech. Havertz is a superb player, superb talent, and I think Werner was an extremely good signing as well. I know he's had problems, and I saw yesterday he missed, I think it was 2 1-on-1s, or they might not have been exactly 1-on-1s, but they were definitely opportunities that a deadlier striker should score. I do think he will come good in the long term. I think he's suffering from a bit of just a crisis of confidence at the moment, Werner. I do think he is a good signing though, and he will come good in the long run for Chelsea. But I just did wonder where all these players are going to fit, and Havertz has come in and he played at Leverkusen as mostly a number 10. Towards the end of last season he was a false 9. They used him as a false 9, and he did that to very good effect. But at Chelsea he's played some games at number 10, but he's often played out wide. And it just seems to me, I could be wrong, but it seems to me as if Chelsea have just bought him because he's Kai Havertz and not with any real tactical role for him to fulfill. Because for me, the biggest casualty would most likely be Mason Mount. Now maybe seeing that Mount is a academy player, maybe Lampard's thinking was you bring in this very talented Havertz, and if he pushes Mason Mount out a bit, no problem. You keep Mount around as a good squad player. If he eventually wants to leave, you haven't lost any money on him because he's a youth team player. And maybe Mount has just outperformed Havertz since Havertz has got there, so he keeps his place and Havertz doesn't. But that can only go on for so long with an £80 million signing. Like, if this is still the situation 6 months or a year from now, Havertz will be looking for the exit door, thinking this wasn't a good decision. Not saying he doesn't have to take any responsibility. Of course, footballers do if they're not in form. But it was always going to take them a little while to acclimatise to this league. And if Frank Lampard does, in the long run, see him favoured over Mason Mount and push Mason Mount to the edges, I mean, the whole idea of bringing through the academy players, look what it looked like they were finally trying to do, looks all but dead in the water if they go in that direction. Doesn't look like they will at the moment, but just saying, it looks like that's going to be a crossroads that they'll have to come to eventually. Other than that, I think I haven't been overall too impressed by Frank Lampard at Chelsea. Now, easy to say, obviously, to be critical as a United fan, but there has been good signs. Some of the attacking football they have played at times, particularly this season, has been good. They obviously have some very, very good attacking talent in the team. They seem to have a settled back four now. He seems to know he wants James, Chilwell, Thiago and Zuma, with Mendy behind them, who's been a more solid addition in goal compared to Kepa. But the results don't reflect a team that has a settled back five and talented forwards. The results they're getting don't match the quality that's in their squad at the moment. You could say that the issues lie in midfield, but for me, their selection of midfield players is excellent. You could argue they could do with an upgrade in there, particularly just in front of the defence, where Kante doesn't quite look like he used to. Jorginho has overall failed to really impress, or to live up to his price tag anyway. And Kovacic is a very good, if a bit limited, footballer. So they have Billy Gilmore there. He's a very talented young player, but maybe they don't feel they can trust him to do the job just yet. So you could argue they could improve in there, but again, for a team that's spent the amount of money that they have and have the amount of quality that they do, I still think they would expect to have better results. And I think if they don't finish in the top 4, I think that is a minimum requirement for them this season. And I think if they don't, I wouldn't be surprised if Lampard has shown the door. I do think he deserves until the end of the season, simply because there have been signs, like they went through a good stretch of keeping a lot of clean sheets, and that back 5, like I said, does look solid enough. And at times their attacking football has been excellent. They're in a very poor run of form, really. I know they won yesterday, but yeah, I would say that he deserves to get to the end of the season. And if he does get them into the top 4, which looks unlikely at the moment, and maybe they do well in Europe, maybe they win the FA Cup, whatever it might be, then that would be another solid season, and they would then obviously expect a title challenge the following season, and they would imagine they wouldn't have to spend another 250 million to achieve that. But it would be decent if Lampard gets them top 4 again and does well in either Europe or the FA Cup, or both. Not convinced they'll win. I don't think they're near good enough to really challenge in Europe, and the FA Cup, you never know. Could just be the luck of the draw, but we'll see. All I would say about Fulham as well is they do attempt to play football. I do think their back 3 are good in possession as well. I think their midfield do a good job of protecting that back line and transitioning the ball forward, progressing the ball forwards, I should say, particularly in transition. Their wing backs do offer a decent threat from wide areas, but I'm often just left wanting more from their forward players. I think Ademola Lookman is a very talented young lad. He has a bit of pace about him too, but the rest of their forwards, I think, are often a bit of a letdown. Similar to West Brom, I think, for the way they play, and sometimes the lack of ball that they have against bigger teams, which is to be expected. This goes for both Fulham and West Brom. I actually, it's similar to what I said about Brighton earlier as well. There's just a lack of trust, a lack of real quality up top. Someone that you think can just nick them a goal. Like in recent seasons, we had Bournemouth down there, for example, but they always had Callum Wilson up there who can score against almost anyone. Yeah, he misses a lot of chances at times, but he can get you goals, and he's almost guaranteed to get double figures every season. And he's doing that for Newcastle now, and to be honest, is one of the main reasons why Newcastle are 5 or 6 places off bottom, while the other few teams I've just mentioned are in the thick of the relegation battle. And I'm just often left wanting more from their forwards, and I don't think they have enough quality up top. Now I know it's easier said than done for teams down there to get the requisite quality in, but I just feel that's where they're lacking, Fulham. Whenever I watch them, I just feel like they don't have enough of a threat up front. Anyway, last game I'll mention, and another game I did watch yesterday, Leicester against Southampton, finished 2-0 to Leicester. It was a pretty good game overall, to be honest. I thought it was an enjoyable watch. Two teams that were going at each other. Two teams that like to have a go and like to be quick and efficient in transition. And Leicester came out on top in the end. Obviously, they had to be patient. And even though like Southampton did just edge possession, but Leicester have been a bit happier this season to secede possession a bit more to their opposition, and hit them on the counter attack. Obviously with the pace that Vardy has, but also Barnes has been arguably their best attacking player this season, and James Maddison was quite good yesterday. He scored the first goal. He just got himself a bit of space just inside the box on the right hand side, and turned his defender. The defender committed a bit too much to trying to shoulder him off the ball and allowed Maddison to slip away from him. But he still had a tight angle to shoot from, and he just rifled it above the keeper's head. And it's a great thing to do from that angle, because if you go low, you have to hit a very certain. There's only a very fine gap to hit, and if a keeper moves his legs at all, he can normally save it. But if you go just above their head and you hit it quick enough, the keeper can't react, and he can't get his head up, or can't get his hand over his head quick enough to stop. And that's exactly what Maddison did. It was a very good finish. I thought on the other hand, like Southampton did do a good job of getting their forwards into opportunities to create. I thought Walcott was decent. I was disappointed, and I often am left disappointed with Che Adams. I've watched him now since Southampton bought him over a year ago. Last year and a half now he's been in the Premier League, and he's not done anything to convince me that he's a good Championship striker. Now, I could be wrong. And maybe he's just one of those players that just takes a long time to acclimatise to the league, and he'll eventually show what he's worth. He has shown in fits and starts that the talent that he has, but again, if you're only showing it once every, what to me seems once every 7 or 8 games, then that is the sign that maybe the quality is just a bit too high for you to perform week in, week out, and that your level is a bit below. So again, I don't watch Southampton every week, but every time I do, I'm just left wanting a lot more from Che Adams. I think he the opportunities he gets to run the ball down, he often doesn't get there first when he should have. Doesn't hold the ball up well, gives it away quite easily. Never really seems to be in the right space to finish off opportunities, and even when he is in a position to finish, he's not among the elite goal scorers in the league. That's for certain. He's nowhere near. So unlike his typical strike partner Danny Ings arguably is, over the last 18 months he's been one of the deadliest finishers in the league. And for me, Che Adams seems way off that and doesn't add enough in the other parts of his game to make up for that, for my liking. I'm always left wanting more from Che Adams. I don't think he has the quality to be a successful Premier League striker. At the start of the season, I thought the big 6 would be the normal 6. Looks like I'm off with that prediction, because it looks like Arsenal won't be in there. The other 5 could be, but remains to be seen. Obviously Leicester are right in the thick of things as well, and Everton are having a very good season. But I thought Southampton would be 7th. I thought Southampton were going to be the best of the rest. I actually thought Wolves and Leicester were due a drop off. I've been right in Wolves so far, but not with Leicester. They have reinvented themselves a little bit, like I was saying earlier, and that's a credit to Brendan Rodgers. He's a very good manager. And I thought Everton would just be Everton, but so far anyway, they have I think they've had their best start to a Premier League season, or at least they did at one point. I don't know if that's still continued, but they are obviously having a good season under Ancelotti, and it remains to be seen. I'm a bit dubious as to whether or not they can sustain that over the whole season, but it looks like they won't finish outside the top 6 at this rate anyway. But it is still very tight in there, so teams, a couple of bad results and you can be out of the picture again. And Aston Villa have been a lot better than I think anyone thought they were going to be so far this year. But I thought Southampton would be the next best team. I made that prediction off of the way they were post-lockdown in the summer. I want to say that I know United had the best record. I want to say that they were second. They had the second best record after lockdown. They were right up there anyway, Southampton. And Danny Ings was right in the thick of the Golden Boot chase at that time. And I thought when Hasenhüttl came to Southampton that he was a great appointment, and that sacking him after that 9-0 would have been a mistake. I thought they were going to, because I think everybody did. But they were very right to stick by him, because they weren't going to get someone in that was better. There was clearly deeper problems that needed sorting out there, and he sorted them out, and he has that team playing the way he wants his side to play. His RB Leipzig always played with that 4-2-2 system and were so well organised when they pressed and how they played in transition, and he has the Southampton side doing that now as well. He's done a great job, and I thought that was going to be enough for them to be the best of the rest. They might still be. They might still finish 7th. They could well. But it does look at the moment like Leicester and Everton are going to be better than I gave them credit for, and are going to finish inside the top 7. But we'll see. I think Southampton yesterday were missing Vestergaard, Romeo and Ings. That's their spine. Vestergaard's their best centre back. Ings is their best goal scorer, and Romeo, I think Ward-Prowse is their best midfielder. He was there, but Romeo forms such a good partnership with him, and those two are so solid and so integral to the way the Southampton play at the base of that midfield. Diallo is a good player, but I feel like he doesn't command the area in midfield that Romeo does, and I think he's just doesn't quite have the presence in midfield that Romeo provides, and so I do think they miss him. And obviously, like I said, Vestergaard wasn't there and Danny Ings wasn't there either, so given that, they still play quite an even game. I think it only opened up again towards the end when Southampton were trying to push a bit to equalise, and Leicester kept picking them off in the counter-attack very well, which they can do to anyone. And they got that second goal in the end to kill off the game. And they had plenty of chances to do so. They could have easily put it to bed before them. But it would have been very interesting to see that game again with Southampton at full strength, because I do think they can be a match for Leicester and most teams in the league when they're at full strength. But I don't know what the full extent of those injuries or suspensions are. I'm not even sure who was missing for. I think Romeo was suspended. I think the other two are injured, but I don't think they're long term, and hopefully not for Southampton's sake, because if they keep that squad together for the rest of the season, they can really have a very, very impressive season and kick on from there. Obviously, recruitment will play a big part, as it does for every team, in what they can continue to do next season. But yeah, they're gonna need to remain a bit injury free to achieve what they want to achieve this year. that's about it. That covers all the games from this weekend in the Premier League. Still one game to be played tomorrow, Monday, which is Arsenal against Newcastle, which I think Arsenal will win. They certainly haven't been a guarantee. Arsenal, they've dropped many points in games they shouldn't have, but they've won 3 of their last 4. I do think they're a bit of an upturn form wise, and Newcastle are not looking good lately at all. They're the first team to lose to Sheffield United last week, which doesn't surprise most Newcastle fans. Many of them have been complaining for quite a while about the quality or lack thereof in their game under Steve Bruce, and as much as he's been doing enough to get good results and keep them ticking along, there just seemed to be a lot of negativity bubbling under the surface, and obviously if that doesn't come out within the squad, then it's not as big a deal, but there seems to be a perpetual black cloud hanging over St. James's Park. Well, obviously ever since Mike Ashley has been involved, and until he goes, I'm not sure things will ever brighten up, but they could easily get sucked into a relegation battle if they're not careful, and I don't think they could well. It would be typical Newcastle and typical Arsenal for them to draw that game tomorrow, or even for Newcastle to snatch a bit of a smash and grab, but I think it would mask over a lot of their problems. But for me, I think Arsenal will win that game. They beat them 2-0 in the FA Cup when they played. These two teams played about 10 days ago. Now, it was after extra time. It was 0-0 at the end of full time. Arsenal needed extra time to win it, which they obviously won't get tomorrow. But I think they'll have enough quality to win the game by a goal or two. And then there is some more midweek games, good few midweek games, so plenty of Premier League to be played this week, and then another FA Cup weekend next week, so look forward to. But I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much for watching. If you have, I should be back doing another one of these midweek after all the midweek games, probably Wednesday or Thursday evening. I think there is a Thursday game, so I'll probably leave it till Thursday evening. But thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Cheers.